The subject of today's video has a crazy story. He played quarterback for a small high school in Texas, was not even ranked inside the top 1,500 players in his class, and came into TCU in the shadow of another 5-star. Instead of complaining and whining and eventually transferring, he decided to stay put, stayed the course, and has now both become one of the best running backs in TCU history, and is also going to have a chance to play right away for the New Orleans Saints. He also got a chance to play in the college football playoff, and in my opinion, is a huge success. Today, we're going to be talking about Kendre Miller. We're going to go through his insane story from 3-star high school quarterback to 3rd-round NFL draft pick, talk about his insane career at TCU, why it could be such a huge deal for the Saints, aka it involves Alvin Kamara's suspension. But before we get started, be sure to leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new and love football content, turn on notifications so you never miss when I upload, and let me know what 2023 rookie I can cover next. You guys seemingly love this series, so let's go ahead and get started with another one and talk about the rise of Kendre Miller. In order to understand how Miller got to this point, we first need to go back in time. To be honest, it's usually really easy for me to find players' backstories, but there was not a whole lot out there on Miller, and I'm going to do my best to tell his story. He apparently grew up and loved football from a young age, saying, quote, "I've been truly living for football since the age of 6 when I started Little League." His love for football started when he was young and watched the NFL on his family's television, and apparently has not looked back ever since then. One player in particular, though, would end up taking his heart. He said, quote, "I like Aaron Rodgers and how he plays. I like his play style even though I'm a running back." Eventually, he'd get to high school and would decide to go to Mount Enterprise and was somewhat of a local celebrity in the state of Texas. He said, quote, "I have little kids coming up to me asking for my autograph. Anything small here is big." When he arrived there, he actually didn't play the running back position like he does now, though. He was actually listed as their starting quarterback, and Miller could do a little bit of everything, and schools didn't even know where to recruit him. In total, Miller ended up rushing for over 2,800 yards and 34 touchdowns, dominating his competition. He was one of the best players in Mount Enterprise history, and was your typical Texas 3-star recruit. There's also a saying that a Texas 3-star is the same as a 4-star anywhere else, and that should have been the attitude when schools were recruiting Kendre, but it really wasn't. He had good stats and also a good attitude. His coach said, quote, "What really sets him apart is his character. I've never heard him say a negative thing about anyone, and his work ethic is second to none." So where would Kendre end up going? Well, he didn't really have a lot of interest, to be honest. Schools such as UTSA, Southern Miss, and Wyoming wanted him really bad, and clearly a ton of FCS programs as well, but ultimately he'd get one Power 5 offer and decide to take a gamble and run with it. He chose TCU over the Roadrunners, Southern Miss, and the Cowboys of Wyoming, and looking at his offer sheet, I'm not shocked he chose TCU. But why else did he choose them? He told the Horned Frogs Blitz, quote, "I chose TCU because of the people and the environment, and it just felt like home." Kendre was by no means the biggest signing on the roster or even at his position. While there was an insane recruiting saga with Zach Evans, the 5-star eventually ended up at TCU, becoming the highest ranked recruit in school history, and no one cared about this random Kendre Miller player who had no other offers. One TCU reporter, though, was very optimistic, and so was Gary Patterson. He said, quote, "Patterson has had a knack for turning small-town players into big-time prospects. Frog fans hope history repeats itself in the form of Kendre Miller." That statement would end up becoming really true in the future, but at first, he just didn't have a lot of hype to him. According to 24/7 Sports, Kendre was a 3-star recruit, the number 125 athlete, and the 1,616th best player in the class of 2020. There was no way he'd go from being ranked in the 1600s to a top 100 player in the 2023 NFL draft, but that is exactly what would happen, despite being in the shadow of Zach Evans. So how would he end up doing in Fort Worth? Let's take a look. So as I said, when Miller arrived at TCU, there really wasn't a whole lot of hype to him. He'd end up finishing 4th on the team in rushing, behind Zach Evans, Darwin Barlow, and quarterback Max Duggan. For his freshman year, he had a couple of decent outings, which included 67 yards in a win over number 9 Texas, 58 yards in a loss to West Virginia, and 136 yards and 2 touchdowns in a win over Louisiana Tech. This was by far the best game of his freshman year, and showed that he had a lot of potential. He finished his freshman campaign with 388 yards and 2 touchdowns. Going into 2021, Barlow has now gone to USC, and he became the second best running back behind Evans. Miller would have a couple of big games once again, including a touchdown against Duquesne, a touchdown against both SMU and Texas, 102 yards against Kansas State, 2 really big performances. He had 12 carries for 112 yards and a touchdown in a win over Kansas, and then had one of the games of his life against Texas Tech. In that matchup, he finished with 185 yards and 3 touchdowns. Part of this would happen after Zach Evans' injury. Before the 2021 season, he finished with 623 yards and 7 touchdowns. On paper, it looked like he could have a breakout season in 2022, and that would later be solidified with Zach Evans leaving for Ole Miss. That was the first factor as to why Miller had a huge 2022 season, and the other was the hiring of running backs coach Anthony Jones. You may not know who the heck this guy is, but you probably know the 5 running backs he developed while he was at Memphis. He had Darrell Henderson, Tony Pollard, Patrick Taylor, Kenneth Gainwell, and Antonio Gibson, and based on that resume, I'm not sure how it took Jones so long to get up to a Power 5 job, and why he couldn't have gone to a bigger school. Miller was productive before that, but Jones would get the most out of him. Honestly, if I would have known that Memphis' running backs coach had left for TCU, I could have seen this Kendre Miller rise coming, but I didn't. In 2022, Kendre would get off to a hot start with 52 yards and a touchdown against Colorado and 56 yards and a touchdown against Tarleton State. After that, he'd go off. He ended up having 7 games of over 100 yards in the regular season, with 142 against SMU, 136 yards and 2 touchdowns against Oklahoma, 104 yards and 2 touchdowns against Oklahoma State, 153 yards and 2 touchdowns against Kansas State, 120 and a touchdown against West Virginia, 158 and a touchdown against Texas Tech, and 138 and a touchdown against Texas. That is a lot. He also ended up finishing with a touchdown in every single regular season game. On 4 different occasions, he had 2+ touchdowns and helped TCU win all 12 of their regular season games. The Horned Frogs got off to a 12-0 start, and TCU was the storybook team of the 2022 season. Unfortunately, they'd suffer their first loss against Kansas State in the Big 12 championship, but they'd still get a chance to play in the college football playoff. They'd ended up getting matched up with Michigan, and everyone said they had no chance. Kendre and the Frogs didn't care though, as he had 57 yards in a 51-45 victory over the number 2 Wolverines. TCU would end up facing off with Georgia in the national championship game, but Kendre was dealing with injury concerns and did not end up registering a stat in that one. We all know the outcome of that game, and it was absolutely embarrassing, but TCU got to the national championship, and not many players can say they've played in a national championship game. For the 2022 season, Miller ended up finishing with 1,399 yards and 17 touchdowns. He scored a touchdown in every single game except against Michigan, and became arguably the most underrated running back in America. He was always in the shadow of Quentin Johnston and Max Duggan, but he's arguably one of the biggest reasons why TCU had their breakout season. Because of his breakout 2022 campaign, he declared for the 2023 NFL Draft and was expected to be a Day 2 selection. So as we went into the 2023 NFL Draft process, according to NFL Mock Database, Miller was a projected 4th round pick and the 109th best prospect. He was not expected to go any higher than that, and despite some injury concerns, ended up getting taken with the 71st overall pick in the 3rd round by the New Orleans Saints. This was a huge get for them, as he is only the 5th running back selected in the first 3 rounds by the Saints since 2000. The Saints general manager said in their pre-draft that Alvin Kamara's suspension would influence their draft, and maybe that's why they decided to take Miller. Miller can do a little bit of everything. He has good size, good speed, had a very productive season, can catch out of the backfield, and isn't super banged up. He's only had 361 career carries and was only the workhorse back for 1 season, so hopefully his shelf life in the NFL will be a little bit longer. While Kamara is obviously the number 1 option for the Saints moving forward, Miller's going to get a chance early on, which is why many fantasy people are talking about him being a top 5 rookie running back. Kendre got drafted to the perfect situation where he will have an opportunity to play early, and hopefully he will be able to carve out a nice career in the NFL. For now, I have no idea how he's going to do next season, but based on everything I've read and seen about him, he's a guy who's not going to give up, and I'm excited for his potential on the Saints. But what do you guys think? If you're a Saints or a TCU fan, what do you think of Kendre Miller? What do you think of the Alvin Kamara situation? What rookie should I take a look at next? Be sure to let me know down below. Leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out all my other videos on the end screen. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.